This is what I'm doing on patients, and this is what's working.
The GLP-1s. This is something that I think has to be clarified. The tirzepatide, the semaglutide, the tesofensine, whatever you're using, explain that part of it to me.
If you focus your entire career on a certain path, holistic, it's hard to embrace medications, which clashes and goes against the very fabric of what you do. And it's not that I'm trying to give an easy way out to patients. I'm trying to give a...
Dr. Jones, world-renowned weight loss and functional health expert.
Chiropractic physician.
Noted author. Guest speaker.
Functional health expert.
I don't think the majority of your patients actually know the full story.
I grew up as an overweight kid. By the time I'm 16 years old, I'm 300 pounds. And that was my come to Jesus moment. That was the point where I was like, I might die. That fear turned that very night into...
It seems like anyone out there that truly cares about individuals who's trying to delve out information just gets shut down automatically. How do you get people to know that what you have to say isn't completely fabricated?
It's like being David and having to battle Goliath.
There's a woman that I worked with for years. She was eating 800 to 1100 calories a day. Her metabolism had downregulated so low that she wasn't eating anymore and still not losing weight. What's happening there and what's the difference?
The greater the calorie restriction, the faster the...
All right, Dr. Jones, I want to talk trajectory. I don't think even the majority of your patients actually know the full story. Going back to losing the weight, becoming a master trainer, injuring yourself, and then that leading you to what you do now. And Dr. Simpson, was it?
Yeah.
And then that caused you to move out to Colorado and everything that followed there.
Yeah.
So just unravel that whole thing for me, because I think that our audience does need to understand what really led you to this point.
Totally. No, I appreciate you asking. It really has been serendipitous how all this took place, and I wouldn't have changed anything. So I grew up as an overweight kid. It really didn't hit, take a step back. I felt like I had confidence. I was normal up until about 3rd, 4th grade. That's when I started noticing, okay, packing on the more pounds, continue to pack it on. I hit middle school. I started becoming really insecure, and it just snowballs. It gets worse. So by the time I'm 16 years old, I'm 300 pounds. And unfortunately, this is 300 pounds, couldn't do a push-up. This wasn't football. Very athletic, but a little bit overweight. So this was a horrible situation that I was in. And the thing for me was I never accepted it. I was never okay with it. And that's why I let it affect me. At the same time, it was what fueled the ability to do it. But I don't know if I'd wish that upon anybody, because I had a lot of unfortunate years of just really unacceptance. So thank God I was able to at least utilize that negative approach and negative outlook positively. But so up until 16, I wanted, I think deep down, to do something, but I was just unable to, for whatever reason. I hit 16 years old, I hit 300 pounds, and that was my come to Jesus moment. And they call it a flashbulb memory, where you just, all the perceptions in the area are like I was there, and I could see it right now. In the 24-hour fitness, La Puente, California, gym attached to the mall. And that was the point where I was like, I might die if I don't correct this path that I'm on. And so that fear turned that very night into energy and motivation. And so I started researching as much as I possibly can. Mind you, this is the early 2000s now, and lots changed, although some people still think that method is the best way. We're going to get into that later. But so I even hired I had a couple $100 to my name. So I hired a personal trainer that lost the most amount of weight. And I was like, look, I got 5 sessions with you. That's all I can do. I need you to teach me everything that you possibly can to help me lose weight. I've never been this motivated in my life. He's a real nice guy. I wish I remember his name, because what an impact he had on my life, right? So he taught me the old school method. The counting calories, counting macros. I started a cardio plan, and I started weight training. Now, I had done some cardio and weight training, but very inconsistently prior. So what was different now is I was very consistent. And then the biggest change was the diet, right? Making sure that I was hitting at that time, it gave me an 1,800 calorie goal, spread it out over 4 to 5, 6 meals a day, and have a really tightly round macro profile. So meaning I knew exactly how much protein, fat, and carbohydrates I was intaking. So it worked. I lost 100 pounds. Monumental change in my life. And I would say socially very immature because I never accepted myself. So I avoided all social settings. And then all of a sudden I'm 16, 17 now, and I'm starting to experience self-acceptance. And so I snowball, I'm in college now, and unfortunately I'm in this vicious cycle, right? Where it seemed like after summertime, the period of the year where I cared the most about looking good and having my shirt off.
Don't we all?
Yeah, and for me, it was just feeling good enough to be able to take it off. There's that self-worth, right? Like it got better, but it didn't get to where it needed to get. And so for about 10 freaking years, I yo-yoed. And it wasn't until I tried intermittent fasting, then I'm like 20 years old at that point. And it took me a year of knowing about intermittent fasting before I actually tried it. And so I tried intermittent fasting, and the results were, amazing. The thing about it was I, like most people, have a life. I have to school, work, people have kids. And the other method was just so time consuming that I couldn't just allocate all my effort towards it, right? That was the problem. So intermittent fasting essentially lowered the amount of effort that it required for me to lose weight. And I was able to maintain, I wasn't fluctuating as much. So then I heard about prolong fasting. I was like, sure, I'm going to give that a whirl, no problem. So I tried prolong fasting. Then I'm prolong fasting. I eventually worked to a point where I'm doing it every single week. And it was that point, now I'm in my mid-20s, where I'm prolong fasting about 36, 48, almost every single week. And then I started doing it every single week. And that was the point where I was able to maintain a fit level with the amount of effort that I wanted to allocate, right? Which is, most of us don't want to allocate that much effort. I realize you should allocate some, but it was manageable. And so we fast forward now, I become a doctor of chiropractic. I specialize in functional medicine. And as a functional practitioner, everything is all about reducing prescriptions, preventing surgeries, and just optimizing people's health. So we're doing in-depth functional blood chemistry analysis, stool analysis, and I'm a big advocate of fasting, right? And most functional practitioners are, but I just found myself using it way more than my colleagues. And what I noticed, even for patients outside of weight loss, so the given is it helps people lose weight, right? But I noticed autoimmune cases, inflammatory conditions, just a whole plethora of conditions that I didn't solely treat with fasting, but it was a piece of their healing, because with functional health or functional wellness, it's got multiple names, right? There's this underlying path of lifestyle modifications, right? And then utilizing whatever methods you can to approach and implement these lifestyle changes. I noticed with my patients, both weight loss and overall health, that they were able to improve. Again, there's this theme here with less effort. And it's not that I'm trying to give an easy way out to patients. I'm trying to give a sustainable, and I think, way out for patients. And I think that's the main reason why most people fail in weight loss and functional programs, because they can musk up enough effort to commit to whatever program they're being given, but it's just, if they even can, some of them, they can't even do that, but it's not sustainable. And fast forwarding, I'm in love with, I'm incorporating this protocol. I start developing the tenets, which we're going to get into, the flow protocol, which is my approach towards fasting. And then these GLP-1 medications come out. So I'm into peptides. I'm utilizing peptides to help mobilize body fat for patients. But the GLP-1s really change things, because the biggest roadblock to somebody starting a prolonged fasting regimen is, man, I'm too hungry. I'm going to freaking die. You're crazy. I can't go 48 hours. Why can't you? Because I'm too hungry. GLP-1 medications handle that, among many other things. We fast forward to just maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and now we're utilizing GLP-1s. At that time, semaglutide, now it's tirzepatide. We're combining them with powerful fat mobilizing agents, because there's two main roadblocks: the hunger, but then there's the energy part. And the energy part of doing a long fast specifically is referring to the body's ability to mobilize its fat stores and run off of that energy, right? To feed itself for the 24, 36, or 48 hours, right? So that's about 2,000 calories on average per 24-hour period that you are asking your body to get from its own fat stores, right? This is what our ancestors did every single day, all the time, no problem. But now you're asking your body to do it when it's probably never done it in its entire life. Because it's very rare that I have a patient that starts in our program where, oh yeah, I've done 24 and 30. Usually it's like they go, oh yeah, I've done a 4-day water fast. And I go, how often have you done that? They go, once. That's usually, God bless them, because at least they remember it, they liked it, they saw how much better they felt, but they have no idea what's going to potentially happen to their body when we don't even need to do 4 a day, 48 every single week. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's the magical formula. So I really look at ancestral wisdom meeting science, the clash of it together, formulated with the understanding that the basis of obesity and weight loss resistance is a hormonal issue. So I focused on that, and having done both in my background of working with patients from calorie basis or focus on hormones, my gosh, I laugh at what I've done with the calorie counting, but I'm glad I did, because I can relate big time to the patients when I'm communicating to them, because it's not even that when people say calorie counting doesn't work, it totally can work. It's just not sustainable, and it's way harder. Mm-hmm. So why would you tell me that's harder and less likely to work? Mm-hmm. But anyways, that's how I got here, man. And I haven't looked back.
So I want to revisit that timeline that you gave me all the way back into your mid-20s when you had started intermittent fasting. That seems to line up with the whole John Berardi kind of making intermittent fasting popular, bringing it to the forefront, telling everyone, hey guys, watch me gain 100 pounds so I can lose it via this methodology. And once that happened, it really opened the door for the scientific research to start. That being said, the average American doesn't know the scientific literature. They hear don't eat for 2 days. They hear don't eat for 24 hours. They hear that I only eat for 8 hours a day, or I do OMAD. I do 1 meal a day. And I see their eyes go wide, and they couldn't believe a universe where, one, that's healthy, and two, it could possibly be beneficial or realistic for them. And I know that's where tirzepatide comes into play, right? But for the people who are skeptics still, for the people who honestly can't wrap their brains around the fact that this really is good for them, what data or what information or what experiences could you really point to?
Yeah, I think we can talk from a general perspective that applies to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then we could talk specific to certain categories of people, women in general. There's a couple extra nuances to consider, and then certain other medical conditions. But as a whole, number one, when we look at evolution and we look at history, right? So for 3 million years, human beings have never had steady supplies of food. It wasn't until about 10,000 years ago, give or take, agricultural times, and we began to have steady states of food. Now, not to sidetrack too much, but the majority of the last, like, probably 9,000 to 950 years was that steady food. It was still healthy and good quality. So we definitely have to talk about what a small percentage of time we've actually been eating this really unprocessed, the horribly processed food. But going back to history for a second, we got 3 million years that our ancestors, our earliest ancestors, the only ones that survived were the ones that could consume a large amount of food, store it as energy to be able to be utilized later. And this was a process over 1 million years. So I actually say this on every single initial coaching call I do with patients, because it's a little bit of inspiration. They probably heard it from the videos, but I know when they hear it from me again live, I didn't do that at the beginning of my programs, but I found that makes a big increase in just understanding and adherence. But you got every human being that's alive today is the result of 3 million years of evolution, where that we are the result of the people that survived and developed the best systems in their body, right, to be able to do just that: consume a large meal, store it, that extra energy. Like, they want to stuff it down as much as possible because they're thinking it's like money in the bank. That's their mindset. Totally crazy how times have changed. And then have the ability to run off of it. And I would imagine that took time, and evolution naturally presented a bunch of our former ancestors that didn't survive, and it ultimately led to us. So when I hear from both people and doctors that you shouldn't do that, I just chuckle, because even without literature, what that statement says is that we have evolved now in only a fraction of the 3 million years to where we've changed our genome enough to contradict what the majority of history has led us to. So it doesn't make sense. And it's a practical understanding of that mechanism. Like, how the heck would that even make sense? And we have literature, and we're going to get into all that, but it just, from an evolutionary perspective, it blows my mind how you could just ignore that or toss that to the side. Now, Why do I feel like crap when I fast? That's a great question. And that is an understandable situation that would lead somebody to say maybe fasting's not right for me, or maybe an opinion leader, fasting's not right for people, right? In addition to, I feel worse when I fast, I feel better when I eat small meals throughout the day. So we have to make sense of that for it to be consistent with my theory and my approach here. So what I'm saying is all human beings have this system to do that, which is a system that stores energy and can run off of it later, run off your body fat. If you have a system in your body that you've never challenged, that you've never used, when you finally pull that tool out of a tool shed. So I use the analogy of, imagine you purchase a chainsaw 15 years ago and you never turn it on. Yeah. When you go to turn it on, maybe it's going to run. Maybe. And if it does, it's going to be pretty inefficient and clunky and not run efficiently and not run smooth. But you can go get it fixed up. You can go get it tuned up. So when we look at the body, there are energy systems aside when you are not running off body fat, because in order to actually burn off body fat, you have to create that stimulus. And besides a ketogenic diet, if you're not going on a ketogenic diet, and we know how unsustainable that is, you have to fast. You have to fast for at least 18 hours because your body has about 18 or 24 hours of stored glycogen, which is carbohydrates. So you have to go beyond that to eat, to force your body to run off fat. Now, it's not that linear, black and white. The system, both systems are running can run at a time. And the farther away you get from your meal, the deeper you get into the fast, the percentages of your energy system starts shifting from less carbs to more fat, for sure. But the bottom line is, if you want to really put yourself in a fat burning state, you got to deplete all those stored carbohydrates. And most people have never done that. So this is why, understandably so, again, looking at the mechanisms and understanding how that affects the body, it would make sense. Quite frankly, I think more people would actually feel crummy when they start fasting, thinking about that. But the reality is, it's probably 1 out of 4 people, when they start fasting, feel like crap. And only a small percentage of them feel like downright awful and can't do it. So that, to me, is even more satisfying and rewarding and confirmatory that I think we're on to something. We're putting our body back into what it was designed to do by sheer evolution and survival. So that, to me, is like the big picture why, in my opinion, almost everybody, of course there's medical exceptions like insulin-dependent diabetics, and we can certainly talk about that in one of our episodes, but aside from situations, I think the majority of the public should be fasting. Then we can get into some more nuanced stuff, like women, for example. And I always reference Dr. Mindy Pell. She's great. She really focuses on females and what she's learned. And later we could talk about how I've seen what she sees, but to a lesser extent. But what she talks about is, as a woman, fasting in rhythm with your cycle. Because men we're easy. Men always are going to have an easier time fasting. We have a 24-hour hormonal cycle. But women have a 28-day cycle. Very different. And there are certain times during that cycle, specifically day 13 to 15 and day 18 to 28, where long fasts can be problematic. Now, for Mindy, for her, it's no, not can, it generally will. So avoid the long fasting during that time. With our patients, and this is purely anecdotal observational, like we don't have studies on this stuff yet, but we give AOD 9604, powerful fat mobilizing peptide. So the percentage of my women that have issues is 1 out of 10, during the cycles, during those times. And so I think that what's happening is, when we look at fasting, there's a stressor that it produces, which is what increases cortisol. And that's the thing that we've identified as a problem for women during certain times of their cycle. But when you give AOD and you're mobilizing the fat, there's less of a stress the body. Therefore, there's less cortisol spike, therefore less issues. That's just my I hope to see some research on that someday. But nonetheless, my point, going back to what we were talking about, of course, there's some nuanced conditions. Women in particular, you have insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics, and so we have to account for that. But as a whole, if you're listening to this and you have body fat to lose, heck, even if you don't, and you want to get healthier, you have inflammation, I don't know how many people you could ever find that are a beacon of optimal health, that you need to incorporate fasting. You do. And if you do have a lot of body fat to lose, and that is where you're at, 10, 15, 20, then you need to do more than intermittent fasting. You need to work into long weekly rounds of fasting. And that's the basis of my protocol. I wanted to interrupt the show to tell you guys about the free resources that I have for you to be successful. The link in the show notes is going to provide you a way to join the free Facebook community. We do weekly live training. It's a great community. We'll answer all your questions with or without the medications. We're going to help you get there. And there's a free PDF which breaks down the steps so that you know exactly what to do, how to do it to be absolutely successful this year for your weight loss goals. Now back to the show.
Coming up in the fitness industry, it was all about conservation of mass and thermodynamics. It was all calories in, calories out. And there's a woman that I worked with in 2010 that I'll never forget. Her name was Diane. And she was about 30 pounds overweight. Not a small woman, maybe 5'6", 170 pounds. But she was eating anywhere between 800 to 1,100 calories a day. And for years, it was caloric deficit. And her basal metabolic rate, her metabolism had downregulated so low that she wasn't eating anymore and still not losing weight. And so when you look at the physiological mechanisms between what happens there and a prolonged fast where you don't eat and then you refeed, what's happening there and what's the difference?
It's a great question. Great question. And we could probably do a literal entire podcast.
We could.
And I always have to remind myself to try to keep it short and brief so we can keep a dialogue going here. Feel free to interject otherwise. But right. Yeah, that's a great question. There's crossover between fasting and calorie restriction. And there's a lot of literature on calorie restriction, and there's literature on fasting too as well. And so fasting is, by definition, the most extreme version of calorie restriction if you're looking at it over a given period of time. But the difference, which is huge, is the calorie deficit from fasting is controlled. And if you understand the limits of what you shouldn't go past, you generally don't have issues. And for example, a full-blown 0-calorie fast or 10, 20 calories of fat, this is pretty close to a pure 0-calorie fast, you shouldn't do them more than 4 days regularly, because we know at about the 4 to 5 day mark, that's generally where most people have a full-blown, in a general sense, we call that weight loss plateau, but a weight loss plateau is the reaction that the body does. So the client that you mentioned earlier, she was much less restricting her calories compared to 0. 800 to 1,000 is still really low. It's about half of what a human should be eating, give or take, but a lot more than 0, right? So it took her body way more than 5 days to slow down. But it's inevitable. Calorie restriction over time, and everybody's body is different as far as how long it takes. But calorie restriction over time, almost everybody is doomed to hit a point where, thanks to our ancestors' need to survive, the metabolism slows down, the hunger increases in an effort to keep you alive. So what we know is, to the extent of the degree of the calorie restriction, right? The greater the calorie restriction, the faster the plateau will happen if you do it consecutively and continually. So what I've seen with people that go on couple hundred calories restriction, it might take them a couple months. That's an extreme restriction, could happen in a couple weeks, right? And with full-blown fasting 0 calories, 4 to 5 days, you'll have the same reaction. So just don't do that, right? And look, you can go into deeper fasting beyond 5 if you do it occasionally, and you mess your metabolism up, but you get all the other amazing benefits that we can save that for another episode, the cellular autophagy, the anti-inflammatory, the probably stuff that we don't know yet. So I think once a year, twice a year, everybody should do some sort of long fast and work it into longer, but not regularly, because you'll wreck your metabolism. Mm-hmm. And if you understand the points at which you can take it, then you can wiggle around that and prevent that from happening. Now, the sad reality is everything that I speak of is purely from my experience with myself and then working with over thousands of people. We don't have literature, so I can't, from a medical viewpoint, say this is the way you should fast. But I say that with the caveat of this is what I'm doing on patients and this is what's working. We have such a high success rate doing this. Generally speaking, working them into a 36 or 48 and doing that weekly. And then here's the key. For the other 5 days, we instruct them to eat enough calories, like literally overshoot your calories. Because if you overshoot it a couple hundred on some of those 5 days, that's still not going to make up for the 2 full days that you're not eating. So what I've stumbled upon with myself was a format that allows us to take advantage of the benefits of fasting and prevent the innate mechanisms in the body that derail long-term weight loss success.
Yeah. And when we're talking about the fasting and actually shifting the metabolism and going back to the calories again, we know now that it's not just about the calories that the food actually has. There are epicaloric controllers. There's how much of the food is actually digestible. Does the person eating it have any form of malabsorption or metabolic dysfunction? There's even the famous Stanford study where they took the indulgent shakes and I think it was a skinny shake or a light shake, and the people who had an indulgent shake literally had more of a ghrelin signal than the people who had the skinny shake. So just thinking about the food that you eat will affect how it's absorbed and even how hungry you get later on in that day.
Yeah.
So there are all these different variables when you're trying to blanket as many people as possible with here's what information I have that is going to work for the masses. Here's my outline. Here's my plan. Yeah, you might need to make minor tweaks, but for the most part, if you follow this protocol, you're gonna see actual change. What would that be?
Oh my gosh. I think that for anybody listening that desires to move forward and start this, that you need to start from, and I always tell people, like, do your best to not fall victim to analysis paralysis, right? So start somewhere, bottom line. But if you are wanting, my advice would be to start with intermittent fasting. And to be clear, intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating is defined as in you look at it a day by day, and your first calories consumed and your last calories consumed, that is your eating window. Not your first meal, last meal, because now snacking is such a prevalent thing. First calories consumed, last calories consumed, that's your eating window. And just start to compress that. Mm-hmm. And if you're nervous or you're scared, or especially if you're one of the people that knows they feel like crap when they skip meals, then just do it 1 hour. Imagine if you compress that window 1 hour, conservatively every 3 days, which is much slower than I have people do it. 1 hour every within 2-3 weeks, you're down to an 8-hour eating window. And you won't even have noticed it because it's 1 hour every 3 days. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to work, almost fool yourself into realize you're doing it. Because if you just jump straight to an 8-hour window, yeah, you're gonna hit a roadblock potentially. Although a lot of people actually, to their surprise, I'll try it. I'm really nervous, and then all of a sudden, their first time, they're like, "That was great." Like, I had no idea how easy that was. You never know. There's so much individual variability between both the individual physiology, the health status of the person physically, and the health status of the person mentally. That's key too, because so many people just are able to push themselves and not even let that amount of stress feeling bother them versus someone else. And again, variability is present. So figure out what rate is suitable for you, given all the factors, and just do it and execute on it. And understand that if you feel worse, now you understand why, and that's totally okay. Knowledge is so powerful. The more you understand something, the more you can take responsibility for it. And so you don't have to be scared now because you understand now, hopefully, watch this part again if you don't yet, that it makes sense why you might feel worse. But it will get better for the majority of people with enough repetition, with enough practice. Fasting is a stressor. Stress is good for the body in some cases, as much as we've demonized stress. There's bad stress and there's good stress. When you lift weights, you're tearing muscle fibers. And that stressor is situationally bad if all you considered was, well, I'm destroying muscle fibers. Generally speaking, you wouldn't want to destroy muscle fibers unless you did it in a controlled environment, knowing the outcome is the repair, right? Fasting is the same thing, right? You're challenging systems to produce this stress, knowing the hormetic responses that are going to happen, meaning like the improvement in your hormones, among the calorie restriction benefits too as well, which are great and well documented. So don't be scared. Put your best foot forward and give it a shot and be patient. Give it time. And I'm confident most people will see the benefits. And then, of course, there's so many programs like ours and others that can help people support them.
And you mentioned earlier the change in just our diet with how it's gone from essentially unprocessed to processed food on a mass scale. But before that, just now you hit on something I wanted to also expand on, which was the mental clarity. It wasn't until I got into not only intermittent fasting, but more OMAD, 1 meal a day, where I really became a morning person. And at first, I didn't fully understand why. And then I realized it wasn't just the morning, it was throughout the day, and it was even at nighttime. And I put two and two together, I did more research, and when you become more fat adapted, your brain is 20% cholesterol. And we know that healthy fats increase your LTP, your long-term potentiation, how your synapses communicate and fire, which is tremendous for your brain. And that's just one little way that changing metabolism affects you and your energy and your mood alone. And with these patients that you work with, from a day-to-day lifestyle impact, in terms of how they're feeling when they wake up all the way to when they go to bed, what do they report to you differently? And what have you experienced yourself?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the list of symptoms that have gotten better are so broad. I hate labeling things like a cure-all, but fasting has got to be up there on the list of cure-alls.
Everybody listening, look up autophagy.
Yeah, exactly. It really is powerful. And it all depends on the individual and what is their clinical picture when they come in. For the average person that's got no disease, their health is generally good, other than they're 15, 20 pounds overweight. For them, increased energy. They feel like they notice they're probably going to the restroom more often because they probably were getting a little bit constipated. They noticed improvements in things like the motivation and energy levels. And there, of course, the body composition, improving mental clarity, because the fasting over time has a positive impact on the hormonal systems too. So testosterone levels over time can go up, inflammation levels drop, and it could be something that small. I just have a little bit more energy to much more. For example, patients with chronic pain syndromes like fibromyalgia having massive improvements in their pain, which I attribute to both losing body fat, which means there's less pressure on their body as they're walking, in addition to the fact that losing body fat itself is anti-inflammatory. And then fasting itself is also anti-inflammatory for the cellular autophagy too as well. The list goes on, and it's such an important tenet. That's when when I wrote my book, Fast, Feast, and Flourish, I wanted to come up with a name that communicates this ideology of this way of living, which is still far from what I'm doing with my patients, right? Like, my goal is, if I can die at a comfortable age, that the world now understands fasting from the perspective of we need to be doing a lot more of it, a lot longer, and as I said, more frequently. So more frequently and for longer periods of time. And I hope we can have science to look at that and identify it and demarcate which groups of people should be doing for which for how long. And this is why we're keeping logs of that. And I hope one day to be able to be part of some study. It's a sad state of affairs in terms of what gets the attention. As most of us know, it's going to be drugs and surgeries. Unfortunately, things outside of that category do get researched, but just at a completely different rate. But nonetheless, research is expanding and growing on fasting, and I'm excited. I'm excited for looking at where it was at 20 years ago to just where it's at today. It's far from where it needs to be, but still much better than where it was before.
I'm so glad this came up. It's, from what I've seen as well, it's not just the fibromyalgia. It's SIBO, Crohn's, lupus, Hashimoto's, PCOS, you name the autoimmunity. I don't know of anyone who hasn't reported at least some varying degree of reporting less symptoms just from the lack of the inflammation just throughout their bodies. And for people listening that maybe their primary goal isn't to lose weight, but they're dealing with incredibly destructive health issues, what can fasting do for them?
Yeah, when it comes to autoimmune diseases at its core, because that's a good category, we have a condition with excess inflammation and erratic immune system function, right? And then depending on what stage they're at, early stage, it's simply the immune system targeting tissues with antibodies, which are like flags, where at some point later, immune cells can come in and destroy the tissue. You find people at that point where they just have the antibodies, so no actual destruction, to late stage autoimmune where the destruction's already happened, like Hashimoto's, for example, most common thyroid autoimmune condition, and traditional path involves involves eventually removal of the thyroid and lifelong medication. It's at its core, at the core of these autoimmune diseases is excess inflammation and erratic immune function. Well, guess what? Some of the main things that fasting does, and there's literature to back it up, it reduces inflammation and it helps modulate. Modulate is an interesting word because what the heck does that mean? So modulation refers to a process where it's not a direct up or down or left or right effect. It's more of like an intelligent action. So adaptogenic herbs are a great example, right? Adaptogenic herbs, the same herbs can have an impact where it could increase your hormones or decrease it, depending on what action needs to be done. Crazy and a little bit, I won't say scary because I'm so used to it now, but it's really cool. It's intelligent, right? That's intelligence. The immune system gets modulated from fasting. So you think of somebody who's got immunocompromised issues, like it can strengthen the immune system, right? People got overactive immune systems, like in the case of an autoimmune disease, it can calm it down. Pretty wild stuff. And there's a lot of peptides that can do that kind of stuff too as well, like thymosin alpha-1. But that's expensive and that costs money and effort. Fasting is free. And gosh, in my opinion, it's easier than exercising. Man, I would much rather fast than exercise, me personally, and I think most people would agree. So start somewhere.
Okay. Now back to the food, because this one, man, where did we go wrong? There's so much that's still preached today that I completely disagree with. The biggest one being 6 small meals a day to rev up your metabolism, but I won't even go there just now. But historically, we know World War II, we had husbands and wives both out of the house, both working. You had the rise of frozen foods and everything was processed. Everything was made ready to eat. And you look at the numbers of obesity, of diabetes, of childhood diabetes, which wasn't even a thing back then, really, maybe type 1. And it's not going anywhere. It's only getting worse. You look at the number one statin drug. I believe it was the number one drug since 1994, yet heart attacks have only gone up since its inception. So we're at this critical point here where obesity is higher than it's ever been. Disease rate is higher than it's ever been. And yet it seems like anyone out there in the ether that truly cares about individuals, who's trying to delve out information that maybe isn't mainstream, just gets shut down automatically. So how do you contend with that? How do you not upset the powers that be? And how do you still get your word out there and get people to at least know that what you have to say isn't completely fabricated?
Yeah. When I was young in my career, I used to get a lot more emotional over that, because it's like being David and having to battle Goliath, and you're like, why did I get dealt this hand? It's like, how, it's not fair. But this was definitely when I was younger in my career. I think most holistic practitioners at some point experience this too as well. And so you get past that and you go back to what it is that originally motivated me to become a functional practitioner. And ultimately, I enjoy helping others, and I've been fortunate enough to try many different things. Colorado Medical Solutions is my clinic, and we do all sorts of services. But I'm so happy that I landed back on weight loss, which has always been my tried and true. That's my passion. That's my life's work, and that's my legacy, and that's what I want to be known for. And so for me, I am truly on a mission to help over 1 million people battle obesity without lifelong drug dependence. But I think you need the medications. And I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without Big Pharma. And it pains me to say that, but they figured it out. They're doing the studies. They're doing the literature. We can have separate conversations about ethics and all that. And I have a ton of opinions about that. But ignoring that, I would not be able to help people as much as I can without their work. So that's the reality. And I think that humbles me too as well, and allows me to embrace science, embrace advancement, embrace discovery, because I think we're lacking that when you look at so many hardcore functional practitioners. And I get so much flack sometimes too for, you're recommending medications. First of all, I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I don't prescribe. I can't. But I have medical practitioners that I collaborate and work with, and we work as a team the way that it should be. That's what they do. Let them do the medical history, evaluate, prescribe. Let me do what I do. which is coach and motivate and structure, right? I think it is a shame where we get so tunnel visioned, understandably, because if you focus your entire career on a certain path, holistic, it's hard to embrace medications, which clashes and goes against the very fabric of what you do. But then you have, on the other side of the spectrum, the allopathic side, which is very much known for shaming and always saying, let's refer to the literature. And that's what takes me back to David Goliath. The lack of literature that we need to draw high-level conclusions is very apparent. But if that's all we lean on, then all we're ever going to do is drugs and surgeries. Before any study was ever done. In fact, what leads to the point where a study is done is understanding the mechanisms and drawing a conclusion. So we have to be able to take a step back. And so for me, I'm just doing my thing. And I love the path that I'm on. And I every single day, more and more people, thank you so much for what you figured out. And I've been wanting to, that was my biggest thing, is I didn't want to be stuck on these medications. So they found us, and now we're helping them wean off. I really thought that I was just going to be able to take this medication jumpstart. But the truth of the matter is, and we definitely should talk a little bit about the medications before we finish today, is that I thought I was going to be able to use these medications and be able to jump off. And now I'm stuck. I start gaining weight as soon as I get back. So I'm just very fortunate, and I give praise to where it's due. And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it truly is David versus Goliath. I think you would agree with me. Any functional practitioner, one of the things they see most is how easy it is to truly change someone's lipid panel for the better. Red yeast rice, fish oil, bergamot. And I only bring this up because the last time I saw my primary care, he looked me in the eye and he said fish oil has zero effect on your HDL, your LDL, your ratio, or your triglycerides. And he said he had just gone to a conference 2 months prior. And I've just seen too much to even come close to believing him, but the way he said it was so candid and so truthful. And I know that he believed what he said. And that's when I feel like we truly run into issues, because nobody wants to think that their doctor could be wrong, or their specialist, or their any provider. And at the same time, I'm not going to get political here, but there has been more than enough events recently for us to know that not all information that is presented to us is completely true. And for those who are unwilling to explore a little bit more, they might be missing out on incredible options out there. And I've had the patients in front of us that were crying because had they just had the solutions, had they just had the information, they would have made the necessary changes years ago. And then I'm actually getting a little emotional just thinking about some of those real interactions. But for everyone out there, if you had a 45-second elevator speech where you could get their attention and it was guaranteed to you, and you had that time just to convince them that they should at least give some type of fasting a try for overall life improvement, for weight loss, for brain health, for disease prevention. Not to put you on the spot, but honestly, to put you on the spot, I think you can handle it. What would you say to them?
What do you have to lose? Seriously, what do you have to lose? I fear of feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, then stop if it's that bad. But what do you have to lose? It's freaking free. Like it's free. Like it's free 99. And so I'm not going to guarantee on my life that you're going to be able to complete it. But what do you have to lose? And I think when you really ask yourself that, what's left to really hold you back? I'm not even talking about the long fast. If you have no experience fasting, then just pushing your first meal 1 hour. If you can do that, if you normally eat breakfast at 9 a.m. and you normally finish dinner at 7 p.m. and that's your go-to, and you take one of those windows and move them 1 hour in, 1 hour later, or you end 1 hour, and that's all you did, that's a win. Your chemistry, your health's not going to probably improve yet, but mentally, you set that goal and you execute on it. Now we're talking dopamine. Now we're talking motivation, and you'll continue to ladder and improve yourself from there. So, and dopamine's good. Most people don't have enough dopamine. Most people don't have enough motivation. And one of the best natural ways to improve dopamine naturally is to set targets and execute.
Yes, that is true.
But Andrew Huberman talks a lot about that.
Small targets.
Small targets.
Small wins and successes. Okay, we've arrived. the GLP-1s. This is something that I think has to be clarified because we still, to this day, get a little bit of misunderstanding. And that's that the tirzepatide, the semaglutide, the tesofensine, whatever you're using, is a tool. It's not the end product. It's not the end goal. Tirzepatide is the tool to accomplish what was incredibly difficult for individuals in the past. Explain that part of it to me.
Absolutely. I think the GLP-1 medication space is fascinating. I was been doing some episodes with Dr. Ebenwein, who's been utilizing them for 20 years. He's on the same page with me with what he's seen, but GLP-1 medications are medications that are modified versions of our incretin hormones. Our incretin hormones are a set of hormones in our body that essentially regulate satiety, motivation to eat, among many other things. And these medications, and they also strongly affect blood sugar spikes and blood sugar levels. And they modified these incretin hormones to make them stronger. And we had our earlier versions that were more of the one per day injections. But what really, like when we're talking weight loss, same names, different pronunciations, was FDA approved for diabetes, released as Ozempic in 2017. That really set the wave for GLP-1s. A lot of virality, celebrity endorsements, TikTok got the word out there that these things were amazing. And having worked with so many different weight loss medications and non-weight loss medications and weight loss for so long, that there's no doubt in my mind, these are the most powerful when you look at benefit to risk ratio that we probably ever will see, because they're only getting better. The stuff that's on the pipeline is wild. So the active ingredient is semaglutide, and you have two pharmaceutical brands known as Ozempic, which was FDA approved for diabetes, and then you have Wegovy, which was FDA approved for obesity. Wegovy is literally the exact same thing as Ozempic. They just changed the name in order to be able to. Who knows why they do that? My guess is it's for a different condition, so we give it a different name, has a different feel to it. But at the end of the day, it's semaglutide. Just the maximum dose is 2.4 when it comes to obesity versus 2.0 for diabetes. And now we have my favorite one now, which is tirzepatide, produced by Eli Lilly. And that one's awesome. That is our go-to right now. And that was FDA approved for diabetes, known as Mounjaro, and then very recently approved for obesity, Zepbound. And semaglutide was still pretty amazing, but they took it to a whole new level.
Quick minute here. I wanted to tell you guys about the free resources that I have. There's a link in the show notes is going to give you a way to join the free Facebook community where we'll do weekly live coaching all about the weight loss medications, on them, without them, whatever it is, we're going to help you hit your goals. And there's a free PDF too as well, which breaks down the step-by-step so that you know exactly what to do and when to do it. I'll see you back in the show.
Without getting too into the weeds, semaglutide is a GLP agonist, so it works on these receptors called GLPs. And then the tirzepatide works on both GLP and GIP. And so the GIP does a lot of the same stuff that the GLP does, but it also does some different stuff. And we could get into the boring specifics of that on another episode, but for all intents and purposes, it crushes your appetite. It crushes your cravings. It shuts down the food chatter. And the food chatter is necessary. The ability to override that, either manually by your own mind or with the help of a drug, is necessary for any lifestyle change, especially ours, which we're going to get our patients into fasting for 36, 48 every single week. And so these medications smash your hunger, shut off the food chatter. I mean, they do some awesome things, make you more insulin sensitive and all of that. But at the end of the day, for us, we use them to handle that hunger roadblock that is preventing people from starting the intermittent fasting program and then progressing into the flow fasting. And I don't think we mentioned this. The flow is FLOA, fasting like our ancestors. This is that approach that I developed, the world's most aggressive prolonged fasting regimen. But would I be able to help the amount of people that I have in the last couple of years without GLP-1s? No, I wouldn't. When we look at the non-obese market, they have an ability to do it without the medications, of course, and they're going to have a certain level of difficulty with that relative to the person, right? But when they utilize science, when they utilize GLPs to help them, now the difficulty level relative to that person's initial significantly lowers. And when we talk about fat loss and weight loss, something that has baffled science, we don't have any long-term studies that show any sort of maintenance of weight to this day. So clearly, anybody who's lost weight, more or less, finding someone that's lost a bunch of weight and maintained it is pretty hard, is my point. So most of us have done this video, right? So even if you're not obese, I find that most people want the help, and as they should. Life's hard enough as it is, man. Like we got enough stressors ever since the pandemic and everything that's going on in politics, and don't even get me started. So why not secure something that is going to increase the probability, utilizing GLPs in your weight loss program, if it's within your financial budget, to be able to ensure that you can accomplish the weight loss, but in our approach, in a way that changes your physiology, specifically insulin resistance, inflammation, and metabolic flexibility, addresses those things, because I truthfully believe those are the driving factors of what makes you fatter and what makes you more resistant to weight loss, aka it hits a point we call it obesity. So we utilize the science, we use the meds to help us accomplish that, so that when we hit our weight loss goal, we can begin to wean off the medications, continue a lifestyle of fasting less frequently, and maintain your weight. That's our program. That's what we're doing in essence. Of course, there's a lot of variability and adjustments and extra, but that's the core of what we're doing.
The metabolic shift, getting your body to actually respond how you want it, to actually burn fat how it should be, instead of just turning to glycogen all the time. Yeah. And tirzepatide, from what I've seen, really is a godsend. For years, I've seen people try to get into even just intermittent fasting, even just pushing their breakfast back to lunchtime. And some people can't even do that. By noon, they're mad at all their coworkers and vice versa. They're emotional, they're exhausted. And it seems like almost as a species, we've lost all ability to burn the fat around our bodies, because we're so accustomed and we've trained our system so much to expect incoming calories, and to actually see in real time the shift that people can make pretty quickly too has been a sight to behold. And in your experience so far, what can someone expect in terms of how long will it take to where they can truly say, I don't feel nearly as hungry, I actually feel better when I'm fasted, I don't feel like I'm thinking about food constantly 24/7. How much consistency do you think it really takes before you start to at least see the light at the end of the tunnel?
It's a great question, and it depends on the person's perception of what the light is. If you, and that depends on where they came from, presumably. So if you live in a real, like, you just can't stop eating situation, within an injection or two, some people are like, the chatter's off. Mm-hmm. So just that alone, no weight's changed yet, but just that, you can imagine for somebody is life-changing already. Mm-hmm. And then you have other people that don't really live in that sort of food chatter. Their come to Jesus moment is when they see the weight start coming off. So weight loss can happen as quickly as a week or two injection. And then for other people, they got to work up to a higher dose for sure. 1 week to 6 weeks, I think, is how much time you need to give it. Again, of course, right? Most people aren't doing my program, right? So our patients, even before they even get the medications in their hand, they're already working into fasting. And I always, on my coaching calls, I always love telling people, yeah, I want you to do that. And they're like, wait, I thought the whole point of this was to do the meds. And I go, yeah, the point wasn't to do the meds. The point was to get you weight loss that you can sustain and wean off. So guess what? If I can get you to just experience hunger naturally, how much it is right now, how difficult it is. And I'm not expecting any of you guys to actually be able to get into 48. No, although I have had a few without the meds and then blow us away, but most of them don't. But just go out there and try and see how much you can fast day to day till you get your medications a couple days later, and then go ahead and hop on the meds. But it's nice. It's nice to feel how hard it is now, because then when they hit their weight loss goal and they do a 48-hour fast for the first time without the meds, I can go, remember how hungry you were that first time when we started and you fasted for 48 hours and you tried to fast, you couldn't get more than 18? Like, look at you now, right? And that is the first moment of proof or validation that I didn't just do all this for weight loss, because you could just take the medications and much less effort than my program, and it's much cheaper than my program too. Now, you do my program because we need to make those fundamental changes to your physiology so that you can ultimately wean off. So there's work, there's some effort, but man, I make it as easy as I possibly can with the tirzepatide and with the AOD. So Yeah, I think I digressed there a little bit, but yeah, that's how I would look at all that.
I'll tell you, man, as somebody who my entire adult life has worked with people in the health field in some capacity and really wanted to do the same thing, only on a more mass scale, watching people go through this, watching their experiences, and most importantly, seeing how simple it can be. It's not that difficult. This isn't a crazy lifestyle change. This isn't getting up at 4:30 in the morning and going to run before work 5 days a week. This is really just deciding to time your eating. It's really as simple as that. Yeah. What would your, man, there's so much more we still got to talk about, but today, what would your departing message be?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, what do you have to lose? Give it a shot. The most conservative wins could be increasing your fasting window by 1 hour. And if it has to be 1 hour a week, 1 hour a week is still 1 hour a week that you weren't doing before. And set that goal, executing on it, and keep pushing yourself. And reach out to the many resources that exist. I know I even have a free Facebook group for people, and I do that because I really do want to help as many people as I possibly can. If you're on the tightest budget imaginable, you can join my free Facebook community while you're on your GLP-1 medications and receive some guidance, receive some coaching. So we'll link to that, and sure. But execute, learn, don't be afraid to fall down, but get back up and keep going.
Dr. Jones, I cannot wait to do this again, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got a list that's already growing in my head, so I look forward to it, man.
All right. See you later.